100 Thieves put out an open application to join their coaching staff for the next VCT season and included an assignment along with it, so I turned it into a video. The assignment itself is pretty straightforward, which requires 2 scouting reports on 100 Thieves Icebox and Fnatic's Haven. Let's talk briefly about my analysis approach before presenting these scouting reports. I think it's most useful for a scouting report to help understand a team's map theory, which can be useful throughout the entirety of a game compared to just having knowledge of a bunch of different setups. Of course, setups and utility placements are important, but only in the context of what a team is actually trying to achieve. Once we know what win conditions a team plays around, it's easier to point out specific tendencies, utility placements, and windows of opportunity that we can take advantage of. I'll also be leveraging some data to help me break down each team's playstyle and tendencies. Let's start with 100 Thieves' attack side on Icebox and talk about their defaults. For this research, I'm mainly looking at their most recently played matches on Icebox, but data insights might contain games from further back just to have a large enough sample size for analysis. 100 Thieves defaults mainly center around control of B long. We saw this used as an opener in a lot of their pistol rounds, and we saw them return to this setup several times throughout the rest of their halves. The idea is that they want to push defenders off these long angles, which give a lot of information away. But once defenders are off those angles, B long is dangerous to reclear and expensive for defenders to invest resources into because it's so isolated from the rest of the map. If 100 Thieves are given free control of B long, this opens up all their favorite options. When little to no resistance is shown towards B long, 100 Thieves have full freedom to run their playbook. They can proceed through to B, and once they have control of yellow, they can easily set up a post plant with Wingman. They can also threaten the B hit, but use this pressure to have their lurker on A find an opening during rotations. Or they can pretend to rotate back to A, leave an insert in B long, then use the pressure of A main to re-lurk the insert up B and ultimately end there. Everything in their default starts from that initial control of B long. 100 Thieves' main game plan on Icebox is to bounce that pressure between B long and A main throughout an individual round, but also between rounds, as many of their secondary calls after conditioning fear of B main is to just send 5 players through A. In terms of mid, 100 Thieves do the standard Viper Warp on the cross to threaten a lurk, and sometimes challenge the Killjoy utility, but control of mid is rarely a requirement for their success, and they often end up leaving it completely untouched. So based on these early round tendencies, there are a couple options for counters and adjustments that we can use against them. First and foremost, defenders need to try dealing with their B long control, because if left unchecked, 100 Thieves will gain exactly what they need to run their attack side. It's important to at least slow them down in B long by shooting the Sova or Gecko utility, even if you aren't going to ultimately commit to a fight. Here's some of the most common ways that 100 Thieves took long. They use a high dart from yellow and then pair that with a garage flash, which needs 2 players to shoot, otherwise one player is going to get pushed off the angle. The presence of this utility combo means that they're aggressively taking B long control, whereas if we see this safe flash on the right, 100 Thieves are taking a more passive or reactionary approach to this control, waiting for someone to shoot it. And if no one shoots this, they get B long control for a moment, which is enough for them to use to go back to A immediately, or to try to bait out a push from defenders. We've also seen them use this Wingman, Jet Smoke, and Recon Dart combo to flood out of Garage and try to punish a player playing the aggressive green angle. As you can see, it forces Kesnet out of his aggressive peak. We saw success from Lev and Crew prioritizing denial of B long as a core part of their rounds. Lev used the instant harbor wall to delay, then continued to challenge the angle until they were forced away from it, gaining valuable info and delaying 100 Thieves from getting the control they want. Crew shot down that initial utility and threw the KO knife to confirm their read of 100 Thieves' setup. From this info, they immediately group up to fight and re-clear it with 4 players who rotated over and find a big kill in the process. In both these cases, even just the lower investment of shooting early utility and showing some presence, they're able to delay 100 Thieves about 40 seconds before they can move onto the next phase of their plan. I like the idea to re-clear green box later into the round because the big flaw in 100 Thieves default is that their movements between B long and A main take a lot of time. If defenders can get late info against 100 Thieves around the 1 minute mark after they've taken B long, they should have a good idea of what their next steps are. Crew went with the 4-man late round fight into B main, which is fine, but this could be too much of a risk in certain rounds, especially considering how 100 Thieves control info in A main every single round and often just send 5 players to take it. This could have resulted in a huge weakness for Crew if they read this incorrectly, and even in this round where Crew got a kill in B long, they still aren't able to beat 100 Thieves back to A and end up losing the round trying to fight for control of the site. A good alternative that's less risky can just be the Sova dart from mid that lands behind players in B long. This dart is hard to shoot late into the round when teams are already up B long and should give info on whether or not 100 Thieves have gone back to A or not. Here's an example where Lev could have leveraged the dart after they showed initial resistance in B long. You can see that they're still not sure if 100 Thieves are still going to come up B when they've already left to go back A, and this is a pattern 100 Thieves love to work off of, knowing that they can always beat defenders on this rotate pattern. This relates to my other point about how mid is not a primary point of interest for 100 Thieves. The late B info could help open up Killjoy to cheat towards A earlier and feel more comfortable leaving the alarm bot under tube disabled, knowing that mid isn't a big priority for them. This adjusted Killjoy turret is a good option as well, because if the Sova dart clears B long, a player can just hold the under tube push and Killjoy can feel fully committed to A, not needing to keep their alarm bot up for mid. Finally, we should talk about 100 Thieves towards A, as they come back to end here a lot and also 5-man it in a lot of their rounds. I think it's generally a bad idea to commit to fighting 100 Thieves before pipes at the start of the round, because they've got the shock molly combo to deny the lower push, and then the dart plus dizzy combo to challenge aggression from pipes. It looks like Gen G had success challenging this during Masters, but I think this was more of an execution problem for 100 Thieves, since we saw them rush through A main too quickly at times, not ready to punish the late peaks from Gen G. But you can see that Gen G taught them a good lesson, because these plays no longer worked against them by the time they played Crew in stage 2. Even though I'm saying this is not a good fight to take as a defender, I want to emphasize how important it is to continue to threaten these peaks every single round by taking the rope forward and breaking the dart and dizzy if possible. This is so 100 Thieves will continue to throw their opening utility, which gives away exactly which agents are starting on A, and it also makes 100 Thieves more cautious in A main, so they spend more time clearing it instead of just freely running through. Every second matters here, because the real threat happens once 100 Thieves have control of pipes and maze. This control also enables 100 Thieves to run their offense, because they can now threaten to continue forward or even rotate back to B, so delaying control of pipes and maze as long as possible is also incredibly important. An interesting interaction is that if Viper is in A main to throw the molly at the ult orb, she can't throw her orb for the mid cross. And without the orb, it makes it much harder for attackers to rotate through spawn. So the double initiator utility plus the Viper molly is usually a tell that 100 Thieves are planning to just work their way through A main. This also means that the defensive Killjoy turret on Boiler should be able to hold all of mid, and the Killjoy player can instantly rotate A to look for a 4-man fight. That's why it's very important to continue to threaten pipes and prevent 100 Thieves from taking A main control with less utility, because sometimes they just fake control with this solo Sova dart, and if this is allowed, then it's going to be much harder to tell what 100 Thieves are doing. Here's some things to be aware of when 100 Thieves take A main. Crew makes 2 mistakes in this round against 100 Thieves A main strat. They fight for pipes too early, and then they also take a second fight before Killjoy is able to rotate over, when they could have planned to take one fight as 4 players as soon as they saw the util combo in A main. Flanking B in these rounds can yield big returns, even though it's risky, but with advanced info in A main from footsteps and utility, this risk can be mitigated because we can tell if there's only 1 to 2 players that could be waiting around in B. We saw a couple instances of the B main push work out for Gen G and Furia. Now let's talk a bit about 100 Thieves post plants. If we aren't able to stop 100 Thieves from getting to sites and they have enough control to start planting, we need to be very aware of their aggressive counter flood plays. 100 Thieves love to fight into the fast flood by taking advantage of wingman planting, so this is where defenders need to be very disciplined and refrain from relying too much on the fast flood. In rounds where you don't have the perfect setup to flood against 100 Thieves, you should feel more comfortable playing out the full retakes and holding for the aggressive timing. In fact, out of all teams in VCT Americas throughout stage 1 and 2, 100 Thieves had the highest percentage of their kills happen plus or minus 4 seconds of the bomb plant, and by a huge margin at 10.8% of their total kills. In other words, in the 8 seconds after the bomb plant is tapped, 100 Thieves earned 10.8% of all their kills during this window, so they are definitely playing explicitly to punish this timing and clearly are one of the best teams at doing so. Now let's talk about how to play against 100 Thieves when they're defending on Icebox. It's important to take into account what we just talked about with attack side, because how a team plays attack usually reflects in what they think is actually important to defend. For example, a quick glance at how 100 Thieves open up these halves tells us that they have a number of setups where they're comfortable giving up mid control, likely because they themselves feel like A main and B long are much more important. An effective way to look at what teams prioritize on defense is to look at where they're choosing to fight their opening fights, which can show us the exact areas where 100 Thieves starts to think are important. I plotted every location that a 100 Thieves player either gave up first blood or earned a first blood to see at what points throughout the map that 100 Thieves deem important enough to start defending. The points in blue are places where a 100 Thieves player died and gave up first blood, and the points in red are places where a 100 Thieves player got first blood. First, we can see that 100 Thieves start contesting A main right when teams start to challenge control of pipes. They really like to leverage their double initiator comp here to collect info and threaten aggression, and we see them support Cryo in a lot of rounds as he fishes for openers. 100 Thieves also have a reasonable number of first engagements into B long, and make sure not to easily give up yellow control. This is usually defended by Bang on Viper and Boostio on Killjoy, but sometimes they're joined by Cryo on Jet. You can see their distribution of first engagements is pretty concentrated towards the main and site areas, which shows how important they consider that space. This is easier to see in comparison with a team like G2 on Icebox, who are retake heavy and much more comfortable giving up that space. Just like we noted, 100 Thieves aren't very aggressive in mid and are just weakly set up to punish overextensions there. From all this information, we can deduce a couple ways to play against 100 Thieves setup. It seems inevitable that we'll be taking a fight against them towards one of the mains, but there are a couple things we can do to make this easier for us. I think the biggest thing attackers can do is to make sure they start with a group challenging mid early on in the half. The goal should be to break the turret on Boiler if it's there and challenge the free alarm bot placement timing. Immediately after peeking Boiler, the orb can be put up to help get out safely, and this should be sufficient enough pressure to pull 100 Thieves away from the mains. Over time, you can see that Boostio will return to playing a more standard role to hold mid if it starts to be challenged. This results in some rounds where Bang is left alone towards yellow, or A is weaker than usual with only 2 players. Once this mid pressure is established, attackers can return to taking control of pipes or green box to enable their attack side options. We don't need to go to mid at the start of every single round because eventually 100 Thieves will aggressively protect that utility, but it should happen for the first few rounds of attack until 100 Thieves starts to give up those stacked fights towards the extremities. It's still very risky to actually play through mid like Paper Rex did in this pistol round, but our main goal is just to make it easier to take control of pipes or green box, which are essential for attackers to be successful on Icebox. We already saw from this plot that 100 Thieves really want to fight for those spots, but their entire playstyle on defense reflects this idea as well. Out of all VCT America's teams, 100 Thieves have the lowest percentage of defensive rounds won on Icebox through retakes at only 24.4%. This means they win 75.6% of the rounds through elimination or timeout on defense, which aligns with how much they prioritize fighting mains before the retakes begin. This also reflects in the number of attackers still alive when 100 Thieves start the retakes, which is 3.49 on average, which is also much lower than most other teams who usually retake against a greater number of attackers. All of this is just more proof why weakening those holds on the extremities is important, because it just increases the chance that 100 Thieves will lose those fights or have to retake and play a situation that they're not used to. That's it for my scouting report on 100 Thieves Icebox. Here's a summary of the most important points for both halves. Now let's move on to Fnatic's Haven and start with their attack side. Fnatic are a default heavy team whose main conditions to run their attack sides are control of front B and A lobby. They mix in a lot of different tactics to take control of these areas from round to round, but once they have control of them, they know exactly how to transition that control into taking all 3 sites. The theory is that A main is a massive investment for defenders to control. They need to dump so much utility there and invest a lot of players into fighting for it, but it takes so long to actually rotate out of there that attackers will be able to beat you to C, especially if you have control of the rotation path through Garage. This is where that front B control comes in, because it's the gateway to the rest of the map. Not only does it control and inform on defender rotates, it's a site itself that can't be completely neglected, unlike mid on other maps. Fnatic default like this in a lot of their rounds, but expect a straightforward execute in an off round, especially when they have Yoru ult up. Fnatic never force themselves into the control they want, but always creep up spaces that are left open. After the dust settles from initial defender utility, they like to re-clear the other spots that were originally contested, and once they reach a critical mass of map control, defenders are put in a spot where it becomes really easy to make mistakes. The key to playing defense against Fnatic is preventing them from getting to this point early on in their rounds. Crew made a great attempt to counter this exact game plan, where they late peeked mid and then moved to re-clear sewers, both times finding decent chances to catch Fnatic as they're trying to creep up. But the biggest thing that they and other recent teams could not solve was Fnatic's Cypher cams. Hero had different placements for this cam, like front B, front garage, short A, and sometimes even got multiple uses of this cam, like in this round against G2, where he clears grass, recalls his cam, and then uses it again to help clear A. This single piece of utility helped Fnatic creep up so much of Haven and set them up to quietly take all the control they need to run their attack. What I mean is, if Fnatic are able to creep out window or creep up A lobby just off the cam info, not only are they saving a lot of utility, but they aren't giving away any info. It's the opposite of what I was talking about with 100 Thieves in A main of Icebox, where defenders can instantly tell Sova, Gecko, and Viper are towards A at the start of the round due to their utility. Cypher can always be anywhere at any time, either as a lurker or with the main group, so hearing his cam doesn't really help at all. This means it's absolutely essential that defenders across the map play explicitly to break these instant cams from Fnatic. Fnatic like to just dry swing window off the cam info, which could potentially also be punished with a triple hold. We need to force Fnatic to actually do something if they want mid control, like flash out window or smoke front B themselves, for example, and this applies to every cam that Hero is throwing. The cam A short can usually be shot for free, and shooting the ones outside garage could make you susceptible to being spammed, but are generally safe to instantly shoot. If these cams are constantly contested, I can imagine Fnatic might start late camming, but this is a win for defenders because it opens up new opportunities and means that Fnatic are still taking longer and longer to run their already slow defaults. Let's focus a bit on Fnatic's A lobby control now. A lot of defensive teams put emphasis on lobby control and usually expend a lot of resources to maintain it, but I think this might be a big mistake against Fnatic. Fnatic like to threaten A lobby control by using variations of the brick smoke and Cypher cage plus cam or dart to cross short. However, they usually stay around lobby and don't go up short or long to actually peek into sight, unless they're planning to execute. This is because Fnatic want the threat of an A execute to keep players on site, but don't want to put themselves in a position where it's hard to rotate out. I particularly like this idea from G2, who faked pressure of A lobby just to get Fnatic to concede it, but are actually setting up a trap on B. Unfortunately, the best timing to trap Fnatic lies in the moments where they are creeping up and not their actual site hits, which rarely come unless they are absolutely sure the site is open. So G2 missed their chance here and Fnatic eventually re-cleared A to hit their win condition. This is why I think solo sentinel setups on A would be pretty effective against Fnatic's defaults. The strong side can play to maintain or late re-clear front B control and then use that info to make the appropriate rotates or pushes, while a sentinel on A can collect important information about whether or not Fnatic are really threatening an A hit or not. Since Fnatic don't have a fast space creator like Jett, Raze, or Neon, a sentinel on A should be even more effective at stalling time for rotators to come back to A after clearing front B. In this round, G2 gave up complete control of A and lost all their info, which caused them to make this incorrect push through grass. But had they known that Fnatic didn't even enter the site yet, they probably would have played this differently. Let's move on to Fnatic's defensive setups on this map. Again, it's interesting to see Fnatic spend a lot of rounds denying control of front B and grass, because this was so important to their own attack sides. Just like with 100 Thieves, we can plot out where Fnatic are taking their first engagements to get an idea of what space they're willing to fight for or give up. Fnatic also takes A lobby control pretty seriously, and a good number of fights are taken from sewers. From this, we can also see that they're generally comfortable giving up C long and garage control, which is where we want to focus on to counter Fnatic's setups. Fnatic start a lot of their rounds comfortable with retaking the C side, as long as they're earning A lobby or front B control in response. Cypher is essentially off-site in many of these rounds and playing towards spawn, relying on his utility to maintain information of front C and garage. The biggest exceptions are when Alpha has his ult and positions towards both links for good and safe opportunities to pop it. Another exception is if Fnatic buys an AWP, which will probably be used to initially hold C, which helps them spread out the Cypher utility a bit more. Therefore, in rounds where Alpha doesn't have ISO ult, I think initial control of C long and garage should be a priority, but there are nuances to making this happen. First, we need to make sure that Fnatic do not feel comfortable pushing down mid, because this will immediately make it hard to take garage control. A late flash window, just a couple seconds after the round starts, has potential to catch these timings and at the very least should deter them from doing it so often. We need to force Fnatic to start smoking window if they want to push mid, because this also means they can no longer do the instant smoke for A main. Secondly, Durka sometimes places his TP in C link at the start of the round, so we have to understand that actually proceeding straight to C and hitting site at the start of a round is not going to be easy. The main goal should be to take garage control and break the trip there, as well as the cam above the C entrance, which also watches garage for free. Lastly, we can't just do this and completely ignore A lobby. Here's a round where Crew just executed C, but A main was instantly cleared and Durka was able to freely walk down mid, get a kill, then TP to C, which would have destroyed the rush if it actually went through. The brick smoke is a good option for stalling information and forces Fnatic to take a risk pushing it, but if we never break the Sova dart, which usually lands on the back wall, Fnatic will instantly have all the info they need. Attackers really have to be careful of this ISO vulnerable and Sova shock combo used to punish instant pushes into long. Fnatic will also use the threat of this utility to push past the brick smoke as well, instantly rendering it useless. To break this setup up, we've seen teams throw breach stuns long to prevent pushing past the omen smoke, but I feel like it's also possible to work a lurker into the left side of lobby, preferably omen who can TP out if things get dicey. Another option is to just smoke off short, which we saw Crew use effectively to re-clear a lobby, but I think the brick smoke gives you more options if you can retain its effectiveness. If attackers can prevent Fnatic from gaining complete control of A main every single round, stop them from walking down mid for free, and commit to challenging their passive setups towards C, your options on attack will definitely open up against Fnatic. We saw Crew do this to a reasonable amount of success, and G2 got to it by the end of their half, but they unfortunately realized it a little too late. That's it for Fnatic's scouting report, and here are some of the most important takeaways. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.